Hey, it's Sam, and I'm talking today about Saturn retrograde. So when Saturn goes retrograde, it's a time to really reflect and internalize what we are committed to, our long-term commitments, what we are, ready to sacrifice for, what we're ready to destroy in order to focus, in order to refocus. So our long-term commitments and the concentration of our energy and the focus of our energy is what Saturn is about, or our lack of focus, our lack of commitment. And, this brings in a lot of issues because, the things that we focus on and that we make a commitment to are things that are challenging and they're difficult and they show our real mettle, our true convictions. Like for instance, we don't take those things lightly. You're really only focused on a couple things at a time. Most of them first have to do with survival. This is why, first and foremost, Saturn is a planet of survival, where you want to keep living. So you make sure to at least be focused on a couple things like, I have enough food, I have enough money, I live near a food source. I bet wherever you're watching this, there's a refrigerator at least about 10 to 20 feet from where you are, where you could go get food. And there's a store probably less than a mile or a couple miles. So you don't just live in the wilderness somewhere out of coincidence. It's because underneath it all, you are focused on survival. Now again, eventually, that's just on the primitive level, that's just on the primal level. But then we start focusing on things like that make us happy, that we're willing to make a commitment to, like another person, like a relationship. This is why Saturn has a lot of power to make our relationships work, because it's what we're concentrating on and we want to have connection. Part of our survival is to survive in communion with others, so that it's not so we're not just all alone. And then you also have to make a commitment if it's not just about your personal survival and your personal happiness, which often this is where our life tends to stop. We make sure that we get some level of those needs met because they're kind of basic, instinctive on a physical and an emotional level. But then where people tend to get really stymied is, what do I commit to that's bigger than that? Like my legacy or my work or my great vision that I want to bring about in the world. This is where people get stuck with Saturn. And this is why, if you're not, manifesting your long-term goals, it's because they're not as important to you as your survival, which is obvious, or your relationships. Many times those relationships have to get sacrificed in order for the next level of your work or whatever it is to manifest. And this is a reallocation of Saturn energy. This is what I mean about the focus and what we're focusing on, what's most important at any given time. So Saturn is retrograde close to half the time, about 5 months out of the 12 months. He's retrograde. So we're meant to be reflecting on our commitments about half the time, which means he moves forward about 7 months. So we're moving forward and really concentrating on those things for about 7 months. And then he slows down and goes retrograde for 5 months, and we are reevaluating. And there's a certain momentum that happens as well. So it's not like we stop focusing on things when Saturn goes retrograde. It just means that we're not, we're not necessarily refocused. We're sort of maintaining and making sure, is this what I really want? Is this what I really want? This is what retrograde is about. It's a time of reflection. So you can see it like this. Like, let's say you have a job and you have to, you're still going to your job every day. Let's say when Saturn is retrograde, you're still going to your job every day. But when he goes retrograde, you start to really question your commitments. Is this really, why am I doing this? What is this really getting me? Is the money worth the, out of integrity aspect? Is it really worth it to make this much money but not to be doing what I want to do? Well, yes it is, because I have a family and I need to support my family, and that's the most important thing. This is the main reason why I'm working this job. Okay, but we reflect it and we feel it, and we get real about it. And we say, okay, but is there another way where I could still provide for my family and make either more money or make a greater contribution or something? And so when Saturn's retrograde, we reflect upon that. That becomes much more of a reflection, and we might start to pivot. We start to change some things internally. And then so that by the time by the next time when Saturn goes forward again, our energy now wants to move in that direction. So while he's going retrograde, we tend to be more in a reflective mode about what we're acting on as far as our commitments. But then when he moves forward again, that's always a better time to actually start a new commitment. Like, for instance, when people get readings from me and they say, I'm thinking of changing, and I see like Saturn has just about turned retrograde, or let's say he just started retrograde, I would say, right now you're going to be reflecting upon that. You have to make sure first, and you're not really sure. And for the next several months, while Saturn is going retrograde, you're going to be really pondering that and seeing and feeling what it's like to make that trade-off, to be committed to this thing rather than to be committed to that thing. So you'll be feeling that the next several months, and then by the time Saturn goes direct again in this date, you'll be much more ready to move forward. So this is how the Saturn retrograde cycle works. And of course, like all the other planets, when it goes retrograde, it makes us reflect on what it rules as a karaka, or as an indicator. With Saturn, it's the passage of time, our relationship with our own solitude, and with being real about what we're making a commitment to, and also whatever houses that Saturn rules. Like for Leo, Saturn rules the 6th and the 7th house, so it's about relationship partners and the work and sacrifice that they require. So when Saturn goes retrograde for Leo, this is what they deal with. And again, it's retrograde almost half the time. So we're always half the time dealing with Saturn, almost half the time dealing with what we're making a commitment to. Gemini, it's 8th and 9th house stuff. Libra, it's 4th and 5th house stuff. And then, of course, it's also what sign/house Saturn is retrograde in. If you're that Leo person and Saturn is retrograde in Scorpio, then it's the 6th and 7th house ruler retrograde in the 4th. If you're Gemini, then it's the 8th and 9th house ruler retrograde in the 6th. This is all the stuff that happens. Now, and the same is true when it's in a natal chart or when it's in the sky. So, of course, when it's in the sky, we all have a sort of collective quality with whatever sign that retrograde is in. If it's retrograde in Libra, we're all dealing with the Saturn retrograde in a sign where he's exalted. If it's Scorpio, it's where we're dealing with that. And the imagined fears getting strengthened and making a commitment to go deeper into those things. All of that. So there's a lot of collective qualities when the planet is retrograde by transit in the sky. We're all dealing with that. And in the natal chart, this is just the quality of the person's relationship with that energy. So you can see this certainly playing out in the sort of collective psyche, where during certain Saturn retrograde times is where we're really reflecting on, is this what we want to make a commitment to? Is this what we're, this is the issue that we're trying to control, that we're trying to manage. And so we reassess it, we reevaluate it when Saturn goes retrograde, and then often when he's moving forward, we're doing something different about it. So again, as always, you can tell a lot about the planet, or any planet, based on how long his retrograde cycle is, and things like that. So the fact that Saturn is retrograde half the time, almost half the time, tells us a lot about Saturn. We're meant to be reflecting on our commitments almost half the time. We're moving forward with them, and then we reflect and say, is this really what I want? Is this really what I want to be focused on? Is this really, because it's about long-term commitments, resources. Like when you really refocus, like leaving a job and starting a new career, it's big. You put all your energy, your money, your focus. It's a big thing. We don't do it lightly. So that's the nature of Saturn retrograde. It's very auspicious when he's retrograde to really take stock, look inside, be able to hear your own voice, because the biggest problems with Saturn is when we forget our own voice, when we don't pay attention to what's in our heart. and we're afraid to, let's say, be alone, or we're afraid to carry the torch alone for something that we really want to champion. Instead, we want to, we sort of knuckle under to those primal fears and say, well, but I got to have enough money, so I can't take a chance. But then our soul starts to falter. So it's this odd mixture of being inspired and trusting and being focused on those things that we won't give up on. Like we won't give up on our children. No matter how difficult it is, we make sure that our children get fed. So we're not going to do something crazy that risks, taking care of our family, because that's worth it to us. So Saturn retrograde, very powerful, either in the natal chart or in the sky.